Are we ready to start? All right, so I'm very pleased. I'd like to introduce you to some of our good customers and friends. And I think we'll start with they can each introduce themselves, and then we'll have a question and answer time with them. So these are our trucking customers. Chris.
Good afternoon. I am Chris Hummer, president of Don Hummer Trucking. My family's been in trucking since the 50s. My grandpa Buck started hauling livestock here in Iowa, and our current company was incorporated in 1982. We're a dry van and reefer carrier headquartered in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with terminals in Omaha, Nebraska, and Shawnee, Kansas. We pretty much cover the entire country. I have grown up in the business, started officially, I guess, in '94. I've had a CDL since '96. Worked in our shops, driven a little bit, sort of moved through the ranks, I guess. Excited to be here to speak with all of you. And I guess, first of all, I would say, since I get to go first, and that may have been an error, thank you for everything you do. We can't do what it is that we do. I appreciate how you take care of our drivers on the road, whether it's fuel on, washing the trucks, getting them fed, all the extra stuff you do to make their lives a little bit easier. So that is huge to me. Growing up in a family of drivers, taking care of our drivers is just so incredibly important, and you guys do a great job of it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Tennant here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Aaron Tennant with Simplex Leasing. It'd be very easy for me just to say ditto because my story is very similar to Chris's. Third generation trucker. My grandfather started hauling livestock in 1946. I joined the company in 1991, graduated high school, got my CDL, and started driving only in the state of Illinois until I turned 21 when I could cross state lines. Ended up buying the company in 2002, grew it to about 300 trucks, sold it in 2015. But got kind of pulled back into the industry shortly thereafter and ended up with a little company called Simplex Leasing out of Jamestown, North Dakota. Moved that back down to the Quad Cities, and I guess I would say I'm kind of in the startup phase or a rebuild phase right now, and it's a lot tougher to start another company, especially in the trucking world, than kind of taking one that had some roots. So it's a bit challenging, but we're working hard. And like Chris, I would also like to thank you guys for taking care of the drivers, providing parking spaces, truck washes, fuel centers. That's very, very critical and crucial to our drivers. So I as well appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I'm Liz Adrian, president of Liz Girl Logistics in Milan, Illinois. Like Aaron, I could just say ditto to both of these, although Aaron and my story is a little bit similar. My husband's a third generation truck driver, just like the guys here. And we owned a larger trucking company that we sold in about 2013. And Liz Girl was already formed and has been in business about 10 years, but it's almost like a startup. We're primarily intermodal, doing international transportation, some dump truck work. But like the guys, I want to thank all of you. We do appreciate you fueling our trucks, keeping our guys fed and happy.
Thank you. So I think I'd like to start with the number of drivers that you have and the number of units.
So we have about 350 drivers, a mix of company drivers and independent contractors. So about 350 tractors and 925 trailers.
And we have about 120 drivers, 250 trailers, and probably 130 on the trucks.
And I have 18 trucks and 20 drivers with a few part-time guys.
So let's talk about equipment. What tractors are you running?
So we are primarily a Kenworth and Volvo fleet. Every tractor in our fleet is 2016 or newer, so we're fairly modern. About 3 years is our trade cycle on tractors.
So all of our company tractors are internationals. My personal truck is a Kenworth W900, but it's the only one in the fleet. And the lease purchase guys, we have a handful of independent contractors that lease purchase from a sister company. And those trucks kind of run the gamut from Freightliner. There's a few Peterbilts in there. But primarily on the company side, we're Navistar International.
And we're running strictly Freightliner right now, and our fleet's about 2016, 2017, and we're right at about 3.5 to 4 years before we cycle them out. But we are adding 6 to 12 trucks consistently each year.
Great. So if we talk about purchases for 2020, what do you think for new tractors?
Well, as of right now, we're looking to purchase in quarter 2 and then again in quarter 4. Our plans right now are 6 in quarter 2 and then another 6 in fourth
12
quarter.
for the next year, yeah. How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, we'll have a very slow year in 2020. We've actually downsized a little bit because of the softer flatbed freight market. So we'll have about 20 trucks that come in throughout 2020. But that's about half of what we normally would do.
So I have 102 trucks on order right now. I'll take 40 this year and 62 first quarter of 2020.
All one brand or?
Kenworth and Volvo, so two-thirds Kenworth, one-third Volvo out of that.
Okay. So, as you well know, we sell a lot of accessories for trucks. How do you feel about fixing them up? Is that something the driver can do for your company? Is that something you try and order with all of the equipment on it? Does it matter to you and your drivers?
So I would tell you as a fleet, we are pretty picky about we don't allow our company drivers to add really anything. We try to spec the truck with almost everything. So we do refrigerators, built-in inverters, XM radios, really everything that we think they would need. So it's kind of one of the things we tell each other, or we tell our people is, my dad still drives 30, 40,000 miles a year. The same trucks our drivers drive, right? So we always tell our drivers, we're not going to give you anything to drive that we haven't or wouldn't drive ourselves. So that's sort of where we spec it. So the independent contractors, the lease purchase guys, I think they're certainly still out there for that sort of thing. I would tell you in past years, I would think the guys would go more for chrome and lights and stuff. In today's world, I think they go more for creature comfort kind of things to try to make life easier on the road.
Yeah, very similar to Chris. Our company trucks, we're very, very strict about what the drivers are allowed to do to those. But that's what makes our lease purchase option attractive and why there's guys kind of lined up for that program. They have a little bit more flexibility to customize the trucks in that program. And I would also reiterate what Chris said. Years ago, I would see lots of fancy chrome and nut covers and hubcaps and this kind of stuff. Now what I'm seeing is more interior creature comforts, specifically technology that the guys are buying.
And all of our trucks are company-owned trucks with company drivers in them, so they don't do a lot of modifications. We don't allow that either.
Okay. I think we all have this in common about trying to find employees and, good employees that will lead your company and do no harm with customers. And where do you, all we read about is the driver shortage, the driver shortage, the driver shortage. Where do you see your new pool of employees coming from? Does anybody want to answer that?
Well, so, we see, and we've always thought that society and rules and regulations have always made being a truck driver almost a second career choice. When you get out of high school, you're either going to college or a trade school, welding, but you can't start driving interstate until you're 21. Of course, intrastate at the age of 18, but that's challenging in this market where you have the Iowa, Illinois, and the longer hauls with the flatbeds and the vans. So we see it sort of changing, they've been talking about changing the age to 18. And there again, that's sort of a double-edged sword, because is your brain developed enough to be responsible enough to drive such a machine? Then that would put a lot more responsibility on the company as far as more intense training and guidance from the company, but we do see that happening. Now when kids are seniors in high school, they can go over to the local community college and get college credits for like welding or some sort of tradeship. And we would like to see something like that start to happen to become a professional driver. So we see some of our future drivers coming from situations like that. Aaron, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of buzz about the driver shortage out there. I think it's more of a quality shortage versus quantity shortage. I think there are drivers out there. We just have to work really hard to give the drivers what they're looking for and what they need, and that appreciation, so that we're able to recruit the quality drivers. Liz touched on where we're going to find the next wave of people coming in. When I was growing up in the trucking company, my grandfather was hiring farmers, farm kids, and they were very well qualified for the job. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of those out there anymore. I would love to hire nothing but a bunch of farm kids off the farm, but that pool's not there. Unfortunately, as Liz mentioned, we don't see trucking as the first choice of a career. I think I'm the only one crazy enough to say, the heck with college, I'm just going to drive a truck, and that's what I did right out of school. But boy, we don't see a lot of that today. I think if we could get that driver age lowered to 18, that would help offer a career path for students, just like we're seeing a surge in the trades, where people are coming right out of high school and going into becoming a union electrical apprentice or a carpenter apprentice. Hopefully we can get there someday too, because I think we'll boost our quality if we start at a younger age.
So I don't really believe in driver shortage, kind of to Aaron's point. We have a very serious utilization issue, I think, in general in the industry, right? So we can all go buy as many trucks as we want. Nobody really stops you, right? So you have this optimism that, gee, if I go buy some more trucks, then somewhere I'm going to trip over this bucket full of drivers, and we'll have freight, and we'll go do that. The reality of the situation is most carriers are not getting 10 or 11 hours of driving time out of their drivers every day. So that has the effect of keeping revenue down. Keeping revenue down has the effect of not being able to pay the drivers as much. So, when you get down to it, increasing utilization doesn't really require as many drivers. So back to Aaron's point, do we have enough quality drivers? We may have. Is poor utilization forcing us to, not us, but some carriers to hire drivers maybe they shouldn't? Probably. Given the choice between not having enough employees and not having enough business, guess which one I'll choose, right? It's if you're going to have a problem, you want to have a problem hiring people, not having a problem selling your product. But it's a culture thing, right? There's a reason you all work for the Iowa 80 group instead of somebody else, right? There's a culture, there's a sense of value, there's a what's the company about? Why are you here? What do you believe in? When you get a group of people like that are all headed the right direction, some days are always better than others, but that's really where the hiring situation comes in, I think, is not how many can you get, but how many that believe in what you believe in can you get. That's where you build a strong company, I think.
Great, thank you. So it seems like I really can't go anywhere without somebody coming up that I barely know or don't know, and they want to talk to me about how, driverless trucks are going to put me out of business, and, how am I going to cope with not having any drivers in our stops? I mean, I think that's probably the the far out idea, but it does open up lots of different automation ideas that are probably being implemented now and should be implemented. And would any of you like to talk about what you think the automation is? Am I too close to him? Sit back. Sorry. I can hear this echo. Anyway, let's hear what you're thinking about automation in the next 5 years. What are you excited about? What do you think is going to make a real difference?
So I guess I'll start with this one because I'm going to probably have the most pessimistic approach or answer. Autonomous trucks are a long way out. I'm a believer in technology. I'm actually trying to buy a Tesla right now, not because I want to save the environment, because I think they're really cool and I want one. I love the technology in there. But I don't think we're going to see autonomous trucks for a long, long time. And it's a public acceptance issue. Unfortunately today, there's a perception that all of our drivers, who we all value, you guys see them every day, you know what these people are like, and they have families at home. There's a perception issue that these guys are renegades and cowboys and are not very safe. People are scared to death of seeing a truck rolling down the interstate. So until we can fix that problem, there's no way that the public is going to accept a driverless truck out there. We may see options like platooning, where going across Kansas, you may tether some trucks together electronically, make a little train, so to speak. I could see that happening, but we're a long, long way from seeing fully autonomous trucks. What technologies do I see coming? All the safety technology that we have in our cars today, adaptive cruise, these kind of things. We'll be implementing those, and those will be adopted, but to just send a truck off with a load going down the interstate is probably not something I don't believe I'll see in my lifetime.
And I see more interactive, like GPS, real-time sort of tracking coming very soon. A good example, we were actually just talking about this, is a big accident that happened here on Monday, 280. I ended up having 2 drivers. One of them stuck there for 6 hours, and he had just come up on it. But our second driver, if we could have gotten in touch with him, or if his GPS could have told him that this was going on, he could have diverted a lot quicker. And another thing I see is dash cams becoming very, very, very prevalent. It not only protects the trucking company in a lot of different ways. It's a good learning tool, a good corrective action tool for, bad habits, drivers that are in the habit of doing some unsafe driving. But I see that in the very near future.
So I would, maybe piggyback a little bit off the GPS piece, right? So I'm sure those of you that work in your stores, you sell a lot of GPSs of various kinds, various price points. And the fact of the matter is, no matter how good that GPS is, we're still not very good at giving a truck with a human in it good, solid, work every time directions from dock to dock. So how we're going to do that on a broad basis with trucks that are driving themselves, no idea. I think where we will see it first, there also has to be an infrastructure to make this happen. So when I was visiting with Delia a little bit before the meeting, an example I gave was there was a Procter & Gamble plant in Iowa City, Iowa, for instance. And about 15 miles down the road, they had a warehouse. And every bit of product that comes out of that plant goes to that warehouse, and that truck returns empty, 300 times a day, say. Who knows? But is that a perfect place for autonomous trucks? Because they control both sides of that equation, right? There's only so many dock doors they're going to back into. There's only so many entrances. There's only so many traffic obstacles. So I think autonomous trucks will probably be here sooner rather than later, but in very limited applications that probably really don't affect what you all do on a daily basis because of the volume, right? So But there's also some practical matters, right? So Aaron's an open deck carrier. Who's going to strap down the load, right? Who's going to put the tarp on? Who's going to make sure the trailer's sealed? Who's going to pull it on a cat scale and weigh it and be smart enough to read the thing and say, hey, is this thing legal or not? Who's going to slide the tandem if it's not, California legal, say? Who's going to drop and hook these trailers? How are we going to do pre-trips? What are we going to do when we have a blown out tire at roadside? If you send your TA or Petro road service truck out to get them, who's going to pay the bill? Who's going to authorize the repair? Right, so there's an awful lot of practical issues. Who's going to hook and unhook the airlines and the electrical cord? Who's going to sign the bill of lading? So the technology, I think, is going to be in place well before the infrastructure and some of just the practical matters of, so I mean, what would you guys do if an autonomous truck pulled in your lot right now?
Get out of the way.
Right on a cold and rainy night, whatever. How's it going to what's Walcott have? 900 parking spaces? How's it going to find one that it knows it can fit in? Like, how does that work, right, from just a practical standpoint? So, will it be technologically available? Sure. Is the world going to be ready for it when it's technically possible? I don't quite think so. So, I don't see what you're doing going away anytime soon.
Ooh, I like to hear that. So one funny thing, a couple of years ago, Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook came out to the truck stop, and he was interviewing drivers, talking to drivers, and he talked to us. And, we did have a small conversation about driverless trucks, and, I basically said what you said. Well, there's a lot of parts of trucking that aren't just driving, in fact, most of it. And, I said, what if it's like, maybe it's going to be like, piloting a jet, where you do have autopilot for some of it, but you need the pilot there. And, I gave him several, ideas where there would still be drivers, and maybe it would be platooning. And so he took all that in and left, and then he wrote a 8-page synopsis on why it was wrong. About 4 days later. And
put it on Facebook?
Oh, yeah. And he had about, I don't know, maybe 500,000 comments. And, the first 120 or so were, I love Iowa 80, I love Iowa 80, I love Iowa 80. And then the rest, after that, nearly 500,000 comments are on, how they hated him, Mark Zuckerberg, and he didn't know what he was talking about. So I don't know who won that conversation, but I would love a follow-up conversation with him. But I guess that's why he invented Facebook, where you didn't have to respond. It's my personal comment. I think that there's a lot of exciting things in the trucking industry through technology. And is there any one, you kind of talked about several things. Do you have one or two things that you're particularly excited about? When this happens, I think it'll be a game changer. You're going to hate my next question.
I'll take a shot at this one. So, trucking as we know it today is sort of still in its infancy, right? So, deregulation happened in 1980, right? So there's a bunch of guys who are in their 20s, 30s, maybe early 40s that, they're all excited for this. It's a brave new world, and they jumped into it. And those guys are retiring now. So we kind of went through this maybe generational change. So in between there, we had another couple of big events, I would say. So we had the whole emissions scandal, whatever you want to call it, back around 2002, right? So those of you that are from your shops, right, you know all about EGR coolers and DPFs and DEF and all this other nonsense that we had to add to the trucks. And boy, that stuff really didn't work very well for about 10 years. We're kind of finally getting past that, right? Well, so the next thing that comes after that is now another government mandate. So we kind of had three big government pieces in my mind. So you have deregulation. You run like crazy people for about 22 years. You get your first round. Well, hey, guess what? You're polluting. Fix your engines, right? So that's mandate number one. So all the all the engineering dollars went into fixing engines for 10 years, really, right? So the next government mandate comes, well, hey, you're going to have electronic logs now. Well, all the IT spend everywhere, all the engineering, all the research and development has gone into, well, how do we make these ELDs work, right? Whether it's AOBRDs, whatever the standard is, but how do we do that? So the next step, I think, is going to be around this utilization, optimization, scheduling, planning, some of the stuff that Liz was talking about. We're going to get back to actual, hey, we don't pollute anymore, and we're not stretching hours of service anymore. Let's get back to the actual business of trucking. So we haven't done that for a really long time, right? We went 20 years of it. Now we've gone 17 years, say, another 18 years, and really a whole lot of the effort has been on sort of fixing government mandates, right? Compliance. So we really haven't worked much on the business of trucking. So I think that's going to be the next stage, is really this optimization piece of it, more real-time data, and I'm really looking forward to that. Let's get back to doing what we're supposed to be doing instead of meeting government mandates.
I agree. Very well said.
If I could just add a little bit to that, the next piece of technology that I'm looking forward to is going to be that utilization optimization. And what I mean by that is Chris said it earlier, we have a utilization issue with our drivers right now. I remember I was sat on a panel with Chris 7-8 years ago, and he said the same thing. We have a utilization issue. We have empty trucks going this way and empty trucks going this way. So I may have one of my empty trucks going east to west, and Chris has one going west to east. Why can't we figure out how to pair that up so everybody can make more money and we can get the most out of the system? So we're starting to see bits and pieces of technology today. There's a big electronic broker called Convoy that has their own trailers that are starting to take an idea that Chris gave birth to many, many years ago. So I hope you're getting some royalties off this. But an idea that Chris gave birth to, and we're starting to see some of that, and that's something that I'm looking forward to. How do we optimize our utilization in a more efficient manner? Because I think it'll make our lives easier and, quite frankly, more productive and profitable.
I remember hearing a panel, I don't know where I was, some show like this, and there was a trucking panel, and one guy said, and I just thought this was very well said, he said, we're still hauling around a lot of air. Lots of empty trailers driving around. So I guess I'll just follow up with that. What should we do to prepare for that? What are you doing to prepare for these changes? What should we do to prepare for, more utilization? I'm assuming things will be parking at the truck stop, and there will be a new set of drivers there waiting for it. Maybe more Pony Express, where they would get a new pony and a new driver, and they would take off. Do you see things like that? Is that what you're talking about, or something different than that?
So I think the utilization piece would be optimizing the freight a little bit more. So if I send a truck to Massachusetts and Chris has a load sitting out there, how do we connect, right? How do we work together? Obviously, there's big brokerages that try to master that, and we're still a very competitive, entrepreneurial industry where nobody wants to share anything. They don't want to share their secrets, right? But at some point, we're going to have to look at that and say, does it make sense for me to go to Massachusetts when Chris has freight coming out of there? And how do we pair that up a little bit? The Pony Express reference, though, that's something that I was really, really working hard on when I had my last company, when I had Tennant Truck Lines before I sold. We had a big enough network that we were looking at putting a terminal in Columbus, Ohio, so we could do just that. Drivers could leave eastern Iowa, western Illinois, go to Columbus, lay down, come back the next day. So they're seeing their families every other night. The next driver could go on to Maryland, wherever on the East Coast, and do the same thing. We're at a size right now, and with the the sporadic nature of our freight. We all farm machinery, and when John Deere builds a combine, they don't build one a day to go to Ohio. They build one today to Ohio, one tomorrow from Montana. So we have to be very nimble. But as you can grow a fleet and you can build that network, you can get to that Pony Express type hub and spoke system. And I think that will help attract a higher quality of driver into the network.
So I would kind of characterize what Aaron's talking about as really kind of network discipline. So when I tell you we run miles in every state every year, but we don't service every point in every state equally, right? So like in our operation, sure, we go to Texas, but we go to Dallas 99 times for every time we go to Houston, right? So you look at that as a network optimization exercise. But where I think the Iowa 80 group is a little bit different is when I talk to our driver advisory council that we have every year, the number one issue they have is parking. That's far and away parking. So one of the things that your group does, I think, that's a little different is you're not putting up convenience stores with 40 parking spots, right? You've got other services. You have probably fitness centers. You've got lots of fuel islands. You've got shops. So when a driver comes to your place, take a 10-hour break, they can do a lot of other stuff, right? That sort of optimizes their time. But that parking piece is critical. So things like these reserve parking programs, and I have no idea if that's popular on your side of the fence or not, but parking is a tremendous worry for drivers. Like there's no way that's not top on every driver's list is where am I going to park? How long can I stay there? Is it going to be safe? And I think
How expensive is it going to be? Because some of them are really raising the prices.
So I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I was out in the truck for a week. So I try to go on the road for a week every year. And that particular year was a little bit weird. So I went to Dallas, and then I ran from Dallas to Nashville, and I had a business meeting in Nashville. So I parked the truck at the Kenworth dealership, and I go downtown Nashville to the Westin, which is a very nice hotel. And I check in at the Westin with my whatever Marriott thing I have, and they apologize because they don't have a suite for me. And I go, well, I slept in a Kenworth last night, and the first truck stop I went to was full, so I had to go to the next one. So, but it's just, the dichotomy of that, and until you have to worry about where is it that you're going to be able to sleep for the night, it's hard to understand that until you're looking at the electronic log, counting down the minutes, going, hey, driver, you got 7 minutes of drive time left. Where are you going to park? Right? And then the next day, you go over the 7 minutes, you got some safety guy calling you going, what the heck? Why'd you do that? Right? So it's hard to put yourself in a driver's shoes until until you sit there, right? So, one half of the country is going, gee, we're sorry we don't have a suite for you. The other half of the country is going, any place I could stop this truck would be great. So that parking piece is just huge, and being able to get as many things that driver can do while they're, on site and taken care of is huge. And I'm a big fan of, or a big promoter of driver wellness, drivers having respect for themselves. I'll tell all of you, if you have one of my drivers at your place that's disrespectful, that comes in pajama pants and flip-flops, that's throwing a fit, hasn't taken a shower in a week, smack them for me. There's no reason for that. I'm telling you, you don't deserve to be treated like that, and they need to have more respect than that for themselves. So, a big piece of that is just pushing driver well-being and raising the bar, right? And telling them it's something you should be proud of and taking good care of them.
Great. So one of you mentioned length of haul, and you had a ideal thing where they would go out to Columbus, spend the night, come back the next day, just be out, one night at a time. How have you seen your length of haul shorten through your business over the last couple years, if you have?
We see it in different segments, so we don't necessarily care what the length of haul is. We care how it relates to 11 hours of driving. So, for instance, 260 75-mile length of haul would be preferable over 295 miles in most states. Now, if you're in Nebraska or Kansas or someplace where there isn't anything but maybe the occasional cattle lot or something, that 300-mile length of haul will work with a 68-mile-an-hour truck in 11 hours. So it's really about what is the total utilization in 11 hours. So if you have, say, a 400-mile load that has an appointment time of whatever, that's all you're going to do that day, right? The driver can't use their full 11 hours. So it's really less about the length of haul and more about how effectively can a driver use their available, 11 or 14 hours.
We've seen our length of haul reduced considerably since, let's see, we launched Simplex in 17. So it's been 2 years now, and we worked in that really awkward length of haul. Our average length of haul was just a little over 700 miles, which was kind of no man's land for the reasons Chris just described. But we've seen that come down now, and our average length of haul is about 460, and that works really, really well. Again, that's an average, right? We still have we just sent a truck out to Jackson, Wyoming before I left. We have some going to New Hampshire, but we're seeing a lot of regional type stuff to eastern Iowa to South Bend, Indiana. And that's bringing that average down to where we can utilize the trucks, the drivers can get miles and make some money.
And my guys are regional, running the Chicago I-80 corridor in Iowa, and our length of haul has always kind of been right there, just about the same.
Okay. So, from your other colleagues, we used to see people that would be out a week, 2 weeks at a time. We don't see that very much anymore. I'm assuming that's pretty much all over the industry.
We still tell our drivers when we recruit them that we expect them to be out 2 weeks at a time. And it's because we don't have, what do you say, freight discipline? Network discipline. I can't even spell discipline, and I don't know what it means. And quite frankly, we're kind of forced into that world because of the nature of our customers. Again, where our product is going all over the place. When we send a removable gooseneck trailer to North Dakota, there's not a lot of product to bring them right back home. So we may end up going down into Texas and then working back up in a triangle, and that takes a little longer. Our senior guys are getting home every weekend, and the funny thing is, I haven't seen that change since, again, I started driving in 1991. I was working in the company when I was in high school, and I haven't seen that change in all of those years. It just hasn't.
I think drivers are like, probably the group here, right? I imagine some of you probably work weekends, some of you work nights, some of you work days. Drivers are the same way. So I think as a company, we are trying to offer something that works for, again, like I mentioned earlier, the right kind of people, right? So if we can find the right kind of people that want to be home every night, we go try to find freight that will get them home every night. On the other hand, we have probably 40 drivers that get home every night, but we have drivers who are old school, what I would call real truck drivers, right? They're like, hey, just run me till I tell you I need to go home, and who knows where home might be, right? That's just the way they're wired. So I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer to that. Some of it is, I think that's where some growth has helped us a little bit, is we can tailor some programs to go, hey, if you're this kind of driver, we can do that. If you're this kind of driver, we can do that. And some of it is as people, particularly as drivers change, they may want to be home while their kids are growing up, and they go, you know what, I don't need to do that anymore. I'm not wired that way. Or, whatever, as their personal situation changes, we see some people who change the way they want to run and what they're willing to do or not do. So I think having options, right? Like any, people want to have some control over their own destiny, and feeling like they have options is usually a good thing.
Great. I think that's pretty much what we see as well. There's still people out on the road, but then when we're reading or we're at ATA, we hear about all of these, people like you saying, oh, we got to do a shorter haul, we got to do a shorter haul. But it does make sense to me that you have a combination and you're trying to fit loads to drivers. That makes sense. Let's talk about electric trucks. You said you're going to buy a Tesla, your town car, and I think that, there's some talk and different companies in Iowa are testing an electric truck. What are your thoughts there? Has anybody had any dealings with that? Have you given it any thought?
I really haven't given it a whole lot of thought. I mean, I think in the winter in the Midwest, we all have our trucks plugged in anyway,
Right.
So I'd be interested to hear the feedback on how they are actually performing. I really don't have a lot of knowledge or information on it yet, so.
So once again, I'll deliver a more pessimistic approach. I don't see it. I remember when the compressed natural gas and liquid natural gas was kind of the fad, and it was going to save everybody money, except, oh, by the way, you've got to retrofit your entire shop, and you've got to put a fueling system in, and you can only go out 200 miles. And I think we'll see, so that fad kind of came and went. I think that's where the electric trucks are right now. Maybe someday. I wouldn't totally rule it out way out into the future. But again, I'm getting old, and I don't know if I'll be able to do this forever. I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime.
I'm probably optimistic. I think I like the idea, but again, practically, are we going to be able to do it, right? So what do the batteries weigh? How long does it take to charge them? What's the range going to be? What happens when we have an accident? What's the resale value? Is there a secondary market for it? From your standpoint, how do you charge these things? What do you do? Is the power grid capable of having who knows how many trucks out there? Is it a solar situation? Is it need and will it happen? Sure it will. Is it going to be widespread and replace what we see going down I-80 in typical, normal U.S. long-haul trucking? Probably not for quite some time. It kind of goes back to that example I used from Iowa City to West Branch, someplace like that, right? And the applications where CNG and other alternative fuels work, that's where it'll show up first. And the other, being in the Midwest, until we figure out, we can't even keep for those of you that work in the shops, I'm sure the number of wiring problems and corrosion issues you find in our current trucks, that's going to be a disaster with a truck that's supposed to run on electric. So, until we can keep the de-icing chemicals and such out of the wiring harnesses, we're really going to have a problem.
I want to talk for a minute about hours of service. And, here's what we see. It's really jammed up. I hear you talking about parking, for example, and congestion. And it looks to us from not having any customers during the daytime, is that it's pushed all driving hours pretty much to the daytime. And then everybody's in parking at, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock at night. We start, that's really our busy time, running till about midnight. Then everybody gets up in the morning and takes off. I don't exactly understand how hours of service in the ELDs actually made that happen, because it doesn't seem like that big a deal, but that is what's happened. What do you attribute that to, that all the trucks, when you're driving at night, at midnight or 1, there's almost no semis out on the road. And there used to be, that's all that was out on the road at midnight, besides drunk people probably. Hopefully they're not the same. But what do you think caused that? What happened? Is it going to change again? Why wouldn't you be driving at night when nobody's out, except drunk people?
Well, I think the electronics logs have forced everybody to be true with their logs. Back before the mandate, people would, let's face it, keep 1, 2, and 3 logs, and there really wasn't a whole lot of accountability.
What?
Right, and the drivers hate it. They felt it in their paycheck, and I think some of the company owners don't really care for it that much, but
All the good old days when you could run 2 or 3 logbooks. It's changed. It's changed. It's made it tougher on the driver, first and foremost. A year ago this coming weekend, my son and I jumped in my truck and took a load out to Grand Island, Nebraska. I was going to drop and hook there, but got out there about 12:15, midnight. Couldn't find a parking space, to Chris's point. It was an eye-opener to me. In the old days, what I would have done is I would have went into Case, New Holland and Grand Island and switched trailers and started coming home. But I couldn't do that, so I found an empty parking lot across the street from the truck stop, parked in there, but then I was stuck there for 10 hours so it's myself and my 8-year-old at the time, and so I slept a little bit, right, but by 5:30 in the morning, I'm ready to go. So it was really crazy to burn that 10 hours off, but that's what our drivers are going through every single day, right? And that's why they need to go into the gym or have activities, because it's really tough. I don't think any of us in the room can sleep for 10 hours, right? It's just not possible. I get 5.5, I'm ready to go, but especially, I had my son with, and it was just, it was cramped. So it's really changed that lifestyle, and that being able to make a run out and back, when you could split log it before, and maybe you could just go down for 4 hours, pick up a few, and you could get home in a 24-hour cycle. So I'm probably not answering your question the way you intended, but I think it goes back to that driver quality issue, right? We've put all this regulation on, this one size fits all, and it's weeded out some guys. My dad won't drive anymore because I won't let him go to Indiana because he'll just come home. and I can't have that, right? So it's weeded out a really good driver out of the system, because he thinks it's ridiculous to put down for 10 hours when he's 3 hours from home.
So and I don't know how much you all know about hours of service, but you have really one primary issue is usually the 14-hour clock. So a driver who starts their day at 8 a.m. has to be done by 10 p.m. Or say the driver that needs to deliver at 2 a.m., so that driver can't start at the very earliest at noon, right? Or they're out of 14 hours at 2 a.m. So I think what you're seeing is a byproduct of people want their freight between 4 and 8 o'clock in the morning. So, right, you go 14 hours from then, that's when people are going to stop. So you have 11 hours to drive in between then. So, I think that's what's driving it, is just the normal delivery cycle. So if a driver's got to deliver it at 6 a.m., they've got to be on break by 8. And they don't know where they're going to find parking, so they fudge that by a couple hours. So by 6 o'clock, they've become trained to, in the old days, we would have called those solar-powered truckers because they only drive during the day, right? And we'd have some old-school dispatchers go, we put headlights in every truck. You could use those. You can run all night. But you can't do that anymore, right? It's not how it works. So you've got a captive audience for really 10 hours a day. But I think as we get into ELDs, drivers don't understand correctly how to use things like personal conveyance and what they can do with that, yard moves in some cases. For those of you in the shop, one thing I think you're going to see is I think you're going to start hearing people complain about driving their trucks in and out of the shop, because ELDs versus AOBRDs kick on to drive at 5 miles an hour. So say you had a guy that was trying to log sleeper. In the old days, he probably could have got the truck into your shop to get a flat tire fixed without interrupting his sleeper time. That's virtually impossible with ELDs. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see goofy things like people wanting to bring the service truck out on the lot to fix a tire because they don't want to move the truck. I think you're probably going to see more things like that. I might be exaggerating that, but that 5 mile an hour thing is a real thing, and it was 20 miles an hour or a distance threshold in the previous iteration of electronic logs, and not a whole lot of fleets are fully compliant with ELD, which isn't until December 18th of this year. So I think there's going to be some further surprises with that.
Maybe that's what's happening when we get behind somebody that's traveling at about 3 miles an hour through the whole lot.
Probably likely, yes.
Probably. All right. So we're on ELDs. We've all read that many companies, trucking companies, are saying that the ELD is, there goes my thing. Anyway, probably cut productivity and drivers' productivity, 20%. Do you think that's a fair number? Do you think it was more? Do you think it was less?
We've been on electronic logs so long, I don't even know that I can really adequately answer that.
Okay.
We've been 100% for almost 5 years, I think.
Okay.
I would say that it's close to that. We've been on e-logs. I think we started testing in 10, 11 at Tennant Truck Lines, went live, or we were 100% compliant by 12. And at Simplex, we've always been on them. But we're in the open deck world, flatbeds, step decks, RGNs, and the steel haulers are notorious for sitting in a steel mill, loading a coil, and then logging that, they were notorious, and then logging that time as off duty and then running the coil to deliver the next morning. I think that cut a lot of capacity out of the market because those guys weren't able to do that now. So now it's taking, instead of those guys turning 1 round a day, now you need 10 trucks in the system instead of 5 to get those 10 loads delivered. And so it's going to be, I think we're going to see one more iteration of that in almost a month, December 18th, because I still think there's a lot of the independent contractors, the one truck operations with their own authority, that they're using the tools and tricks that Chris described to further cheat the system. We can't do it with our fleet. Your fleet can't do it. Liz's fleet can't do it. But there's going to be one more shakedown in capacity crunch coming in about a month. And I think we'll see the effects of that in January, February.
Do you have anything to add, Liz?
I don't.
Okay. I just want to end up, and then we'll open it to questions if anybody has any. But I know in Washington, D.C., the trucking industry and the truck stop industry are working together on getting a transportation bill out, mainly that uses the road taxes for roads and that we have improvements. And, I guess from the truck stop industry, it's nice to see us working together on something, and that we're focusing on increasing the fuel tax rather than tolling existing roads and commercializing rest areas, which is our #1 issue. So I will say thank you for that, and I know that NATSO and the ATA and TCA all have a great relationship on that. Is there anything you would like to add about the transportation bill that's important to you?
I think in general, the industry's in favor of increasing fuel tax, understands that that's the best mechanism to fund infrastructure. Eventually, we're going to have the issue of alternative fuel vehicles, and how do we tax them adequately? Is it registration fees? Is it some other method? So as that grows, that's certainly an issue that I don't know that we adequately address anywhere today, right? So I think that's the piece that's maybe to be determined at this point.
I think we just went through this. My company's based on the Illinois side of the river, along with Liz's. We just went through this in Illinois. We had a major fuel tax increase. And people just thought it was crazy that a trucker was standing up to say, yeah, we want this, right? But the reasons is because Illinois put in place something called a lockbox, where all those funds had to go back into the infrastructure. So any additional increase that the state is now receiving from fuel tax money has to go back to build roads, to ease congestion. That creates jobs. Now I get to haul more John Deere wheel loaders to stuff. My trucks are going to flow smoother. It just all comes back, and it works really well for our industry. And above and beyond that, we have a fuel surcharge in place. Most of us do. And that's the one mechanism that our customers are used to, fluctuating and increasing. I can't go increase my line haul rates. I can't put another accessorial charge on for tolls or for something like that. But if fuel goes up and my surcharge goes up, it's a way for me to help pass that cost on so it doesn't negatively impact my company. But we can get it back to where we need it. So though I'm probably the first to ever endorse a tax of any kind, I was standing up advocating for that, and I'm doing the same thing on the federal level because we have the right administration in place right now to get that done, to make sure that if that tax goes up, it's coming back to where we can see benefit from it.
And I agree with Aaron. I'm 100% for the fuel tax versus tolls, as long as it's going back to the roads and the infrastructure where they say it's going to go. And I do feel, as Aaron does, is we do have the right administration in the federal level and to make sure that it does come back. And it does. It creates jobs. It keeps the economy rolling. So.
Great, thank you. So does anybody have a question? Oh, here they go.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Will you go ahead first? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I'm Tom, and I work in the shops here for Iowa 80. I do thank you guys for coming, and girls, to come and let us pose a question to you, which would be, I think, more for Chris, because I see a lot of your trucks in our shops. What single thing that you could possibly suggest for us to help you? I mean, if you want to see something out of our 3 Petros and 1 TA shop, what would that be?
So I would tell you that I don't know that I've ever really heard a negative comment from any of our drivers about any of the service they've received at any Iowa 80 location. The thing I think you'll see more of, Tom, is trying to be aware of drivers' hours of service in terms of, you know, hey, if you're on break or you're here for a 34, is there a way to set an expectation to say, hey, this guy that delivers an hour from here and has got 2 hours left, I'm going to bring him in first and fix his tire to get him out of here because it's not going to matter. Some kind of appointment scheduling. So that's one of the things that I've been on our dealer partners and such about is taking that hours of service piece into account when we're scheduling maintenance. We just had a meeting with our terminal managers and director of maintenance internally about even how internally can we do a better job of managing our drivers' hours of service as it relates to shop scheduling. Well, thank you. That's going to be a big piece.
I'm Mike Daling. This question is for Chris. No?
I didn't know there was going to be a test.
No, there's no score. This just pertains to when you were down to 7 minutes. Was that safety guy Randy Kopecki that was getting after you?
What now? What about Randy?
Randy Kopecki and the 7 minutes left on the hours of service and you hadn't found a parking spot?
Right. No, that's, I mean, one of the things that I pride us on is we 110% believe that our drivers should be compliant every minute they're on the clock. So one of the things we won't do is if we can't run the company the right way and be profitable and be a good place to work, we're not going to do it. So I'm going to hold myself to the same standard. I'm going to hold the drivers to. Right, my truck was set at the same speed limit. I was using the same e-logs. I was using the same fuel stops, same fuel card. And that's just what you have to do, right? You can't. You have to have that discipline in your company that your drivers are going to run compliant and you're going to take care of them. And get everybody on board doing the right thing and safety and compliance, right? Nobody nobody wins in safety and compliance, right? No driver ever has gotten out of the truck and jogged over to the safety office because he's just, boy, I really want to see those guys. I'm missing them, right? It's just not how it works, right? But it's maybe developing a culture of collaboration where the drivers and safety have a mutual respect. And, we're very serious about that parking thing and running compliant. You just have to be in today's world.
Hey, welcome to our meeting, and I'm Joel from our Petro location in Joplin, Missouri. And y'all talked a little bit about some of the metrics like the length of haul and things like that. Could you tell us what maybe on a daily, weekly basis, some of the metrics you track on a truck that maybe if we were aware of, we could be a better service to you and help you hit those metrics?
So sort of the old rule of thumb in trucking is really 2,500 miles a week. So you think of that and you think, okay, well, a driver has 70 hours to drive, so choose 50 miles an hour. They ought to be able to run 2,500 miles in 50 hours, right? The reality of that is with congestion and such, that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of delays. So the average driver across the industry, I want to say, is going to end up, instead of that 70 hours a week of driving that they theoretically could use, it's going to be somewhere in the high 40s or low 50s. So again, it all goes back to any hours that they can save generally translates into revenue. I would tell you just sort of a swag guess rule of thumb. If you said the revenue per truck should be $100 an hour and 2,500 miles a week, something like that would be probably a nice round number to use as a rule of thumb. You guys agree? Or?
Yeah, all of our metrics that we're tracking day in, day out are all revenue driven, but they come back to the basics, right? So we need to be hitting 436 miles a day per truck, per active truck. So that doesn't sound like a lot when I can get in my car and drive 600 or 700 miles in 10 hours. But it's a lot when you've got to load, unload in there. So that's probably the first one that we're looking at. And then we're looking at active drivers, trucks available. So as that relates to you, if a truck is sitting in a shop, that's going to hit our inactive driver list because waiting on parts or something like that. So we're trying to get our mileage, and then we're looking at what do we have to make that goal, and then how does that translate into revenue. We're pretty simple dudes. It's not real complicated. It's all down to the dollar.
Right, and we're looking at miles, dwell time, idle time, same thing.
We have time for one more.
I do the fleet sales on mostly the fuel and the truck wash side. My question to you guys is when you have people like us coming in, salespeople come in saying, hey, we want you to come to our truck stop. We put millions of dollars back into our facilities to make it great for your places or for your drivers to stop. How do you choose a group of truck stops to force your drivers to go to, or do you force them to follow an optimizer when they're out on the road stopping for fuel?
So we do most of our fueling at the terminal, but we do have the times where our drivers are fueling on the road, and our fuel cards do allow discounts at certain areas. And we're looking for cleanliness of the stop, the customer service of the stop, what the salesperson has to offer and how they present it, but it's mainly up to the driver in our business.
So we do close down our network, and there's kind of a hierarchy in our decision process, and the first starts with pricing and discounts, obviously, and then the very, very, very close second, once we get that kind of out of the way, is where do our drivers want to go, and where are we providing value to them. It's been brought up many times on the panel today. We don't want to put them somewhere just for price if they're going to be stuck in that damn truck for 10 hours and say they happen to have their 8-year-old with them. That's not fun, right? So you want a little space, you want some amenities, cleanliness. So I think it does start with price, right? We have to have that hard discussion first, but as soon as we get that out of the way, then comes all the differentiators that our drivers are coming back to us with.
So we do not use an optimizer. We do have a lockdown network with our fuel card vendor. Price is always important, right? So trucking's a game of pennies, right? So if the next guy's buying fuel cheaper than you, their fuel mileage is different, you're at a disadvantage. I would say that proximity is probably the biggest piece in the hours of service game is basically the drivers have to stop at wherever is the best fit for what they have to do later in the day. So that really varies depending on where you're at in the country. So there could be some really bad truck stops that get lots of business because they happen to be in the right place, right? That's the most convenient place to start your morning or end your night or whatever that situation seems to be. We certainly take driver feedback, and we certainly look at accident frequency and stuff, right? So if we see, hey, every month we lose a hood in this parking lot, guess where we don't go pretty soon, right? That's a bad parking lot. But I know our most efficient drivers, they can tell you if I'm going from here to here, this truck stop is the fastest one to get on and off the interstate, get to a fuel island, get fueled. Hey, I don't want to go there because trucks are 10 deep. I got to make 3 left-hand turns and sit at a stoplight. So your good drivers know it to that detail. I think that selection process is getting trickier and trickier the more and more we get down to the minute in an e-log world and an efficiency world. It's not as easy of a number to hit as it used to be. That's not a very good answer because it's like 1,000 things that go into the equation. So, sorry.
All right. All right, David, let her rip.
I'm David Layton with Catscale Company. I certainly appreciate all the business you provide to us. My question is somewhat futuristic in thinking your optimizations and your efficiencies that you're going to try to accomplish in the future. Where does the weight limit of your loaded tractor trailer fall in that equation? Are you for or against increased weights? Where do we go with weights as far as efficiency?
I don't think I could care less what the weight is. From a cat scale thing, I would tell you that the cat scale Weigh My Truck app is such a huge step in this whole utilization efficiency scenario. That's one of the greatest gifts truck drivers have probably gotten in the last 10 years. That thing works just fantastic. From a cat scale standpoint, I would say I would like to have you have like an industrial parks to have drive-up cat scales in more locations so that drivers could weigh without having to go 20 miles out of the way to wherever the nearest location is. If I was running cat scale, I would be looking at large industrial parks, figuring out where I could co-locate a scale with a large shipper receiver, that kind of thing, because that helps us with utilization. If the driver doesn't need fuel, if they don't need to eat, et cetera, you could have tons of out of route miles and lots of wasted time just trying to weigh. So, and obviously everybody knows cat scale is the best weigh solution anywhere, and the Weigh My Truck app is fantastic. We've got our fuel cards tied to it. That's honestly one of the best pieces of trucking technology there is, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. The app is fantastic. I like where Chris is going, putting the scale locations where the trucks are to cut down on maybe driving 10 miles the wrong way or something like that, right? Your first question was about weight, and I'm adamantly against any sort of increase in size or weight. I think with the driver that we're bringing up today, I started my comments with years ago it was the farm kids, right? They had this inherent sense of what weight and braking is. because they grew up around machinery, and today's driver doesn't have that. So from a safety perspective, I like that the 80,000 pounds is right where it's at. Obviously, we have to haul heavier when we're hauling big machinery, but we're putting more axles and more brakes and stuff like that to keep that safety side. So from a size and weight perspective, I think we're fine right where we're at.
I think there's probably more public support for autonomous trucks than there is for an increased weight limit. That's not politically feasible. I don't see that going anywhere.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.